can also experience cognitive dissonance when we're trying to make difficult choices, trying to make rational decisions. Dissonance can be aroused by the inconsistency of accepting the negatives of one choice while rejecting the positives of the other choice. So for you, it may be choosing between two different universities to transfer to when you're done with your program here, or which job to accept. You might ask, well, why not just do a cost-benefit analysis, weigh the pros and the cons, and then decide based on whichever choice has the most pros? Many times that's easier said than done, since many times the pros and cons are unpredictable and complex in nature. So decision dissonance is typically resolved by emphasizing the positives and minimizing the negatives of whichever choice is selected. And it's also resolved by emphasizing the negatives of the unselected choices and focusing on all of the positives of the choice that you made. Here's an example, choosing between living in the big city or a small town. If you choose the big city, people may emphasize how great it is to be able to go out to several different restaurants, museums, theaters, and minimize how frustrating the traffic is. If the small town is selected, people might emphasize how great it is not to deal with traffic and minimize not being able to go to nice restaurants and museums. After a choice, one tends to rationalize one's decision as the best by noticing positive aspects of their choice and ignoring positive aspects of the choice that they decided against. It's important to consider that these rationalizations, although they often occur after the choice is made, that they can also occur before the choice is made. Let's talk about effort justification. So this is defined by our book as the tendency to reduce dissonance by justifying the time, effort, or money devoted to something that turned out to be unpleasant or disappointing. This is also called the sweet lemons justification, or putting a spin on it, saying, well, it's not really that bad that I had to spend so much time, effort, and money on this endeavor. For instance, the book has an example that many people that have decided not to have children suspect that parents who have children some parents that have children might exaggerate the joy and satisfaction that they get from their children to justify the time and energy that they put into parenting. Now, the last frame and this frame both relate to number 15 on your study guide, as well as some of the examples that we'll give for this effort justification. So again, effort justification is about attempts to reduce the dissonance that you feel in spending too much time, energy, effort, or money in some endeavor that is unpleasant or disappointing. And the greater effort expended leads to more dissonance and more attempts to rationalize the behavior or justify it. Some examples are club initiations. One study found that women who had to undergo the most severe initiation to join a discussion group reported the most liking for the group, even though the discussion was actually very boring. Another example is fraternity hazings. Fraternities, that's one of the purposes of fraternity hazings, unfortunately, is to build loyalty with its potential members. Fraternities with more severe initiations tend to have more loyal members. And again, we call this the sweet lemons rationalization. so that people think, well, it's not so bad after all, to justify the effort that they have to put in. Now we're going to be talking about induced compliance, and it's part of cognitive dissonance theory. It's can be used as a research strategy, but the example I have for you is actually a real life example taken from your textbook. Induced or forced compliance is the method of subtly compelling people to behave in a manner that is inconsistent with their beliefs, attitudes, and values in order to elicit dissonance and therefore a change in their original views. So the idea is require someone to do something that is against their beliefs or morals or attitudes, and then with the idea behind it that then they will change their attitudes to match their behavior. And the book has a really good example in President Johnson's fact-finding mission to Vietnam. So this was a war that there was a lot of controversy about whether or not we should be in Vietnam, and it went on for quite a long time. And some of, especially U.S. Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara and others, had some reservations about continuing the war. People that were actively engaged in supporting President Johnson in the war privately had issues with it. And Johnson was aware of this. So his response to this, ironically, was to send them all on a fact-finding mission to Vietnam, along with reporters that they had to defend the U.S. policy in Vietnam about. So they were basically defending against their own values and beliefs. Johnson knew this. It was, you might think it's risky, but he knew that they wouldn't go against policy in their profession, and he saw them as professionals that would not do that. The result was, as you might expect, they did come up with a lot of reasons why they should stay in the war, and they actually changed their own attitudes as a result and became privately supportive of the war. One of the first studies on cognitive dissonance was done by Festinger and Carl Smith in 1959. And in this study, they asked participants to do a really boring task. The task was loading spools on a tray and then turning the pegs 1/4 turn at a time when they were told to do so. And it was, and then they had the participants rate how interesting the task was afterwards. As you might guess, the task was rated as extremely uninteresting. Then they asked some of those same participants if they would be a Confederate, if they would stand in for the researcher who couldn't be there and be a Confederate and tell the next participant that the task was very interesting. Some of those people that agreed to be a Confederate and tell the next participant the task was really interesting were paid $1, and others were paid $20. Keep in mind that all of the participants that agreed to be Confederates had rated the task as very uninteresting, and so in effect they were lying when they told the next participant that it was very interesting. So after they went ahead and did this, those same participants were asked how much fun they really thought the task was. And the participants that had paid $20 still thought the task was boring, at least as boring as they thought it was originally, and maybe even a little more boring for some. But the participants who were paid only $1 actually changed their attitude and said the task was actually enjoyable. Why? Lying to someone for $1, according to the interpretation of the researchers, caused more dissonance than lying to someone for $20. So getting paid for doing something that goes against your values can be justified because you're at least receiving some compensation for lying. $1 is not a lot of money to be rewarded for acting against one's beliefs. So you might want to come up with other rationalizations to justify your behavior of going against your values and beliefs. For instance, one rationalization might be, I didn't really lie. That task wasn't so bad after all. So that reflects an actual attitude change. And they tend to be more motivated to justify their action if they got less. So here are the actual results in the form of a chart. We have the three groups here. The control group, this indicates the ratings of enjoyment, how much they enjoyed it. And you can see the control group who simply did the boring task and nothing else did not enjoy the task at all. So it's in the negative here. Here is the group that received $1 for lying. And you can see how high their rating is compared to the control group. And then here's the group that received $20. And you can see it remained at baseline or slightly below their first control group experience. Another study that's really interesting is called the Forbidden Toy Study. And in this study, children are given a set of toys and asked to rate each one. And then they're told that the two toys that they rated the highest, they would not be able to play with. They were told that if they played with the forbidden toy, they would make an adult either annoyed or very, very angry. So these represent two different conditions that the children were in. Some children were told that an adult would be annoyed. Another group was told that an adult would be very, very angry and take all the toys away and never come back. In both conditions, the researcher left the room, told the children that they would leave the room, but the children were being secretly observed while they played with the toys. All of the children obeyed the rules and did not play with the forbidden toy. When the researcher returned to the room, they had the children rate the toys again. Interestingly, the children that were in the mild threat condition evaluated the forbidden toy less favorably than they did to begin with. But the children that were in the severe threat condition evaluated the forbidden toy as favorable as they had originally rated it, or some of them even more favorable. So this sums up what I just said here. They all resisted playing with the forbidden toy. Later they were asked to rate the toys again. And it was the children in the mild threat condition that seemed to find the toy less desirable than they did before. But the forbiddenness of the toy in the severe threat condition made it even more attractive, so they rated it as favorable or even more favorable than before. So in conclusion, giving mild threats of punishment are a weak reason for resisting something that is desired. So attitude changes to rationalize the behavior. So the idea here is that the children probably felt in the mild condition that the toy isn't so great after all. The children in the severe threat condition, though, had good reason to resist the behavior, but that may result in the behavior seeming even more appealing. So we can see here that dissonance is produced when there is insufficient justification. So basically the take-home message here is that you want to give children small rewards if you want their attitudes to change, not large rewards, and you want to give children small punishments instead of large punishments if you want them to change their attitude and their behavior.